The bank manager's face went white as I slid the withdrawal slip across the marble counter. $7 million. Every last cent. His hands trembled as he picked up the paper, reading the numbers twice, 3 times, like he was trying to solve an equation that didn't make sense. Behind him, my wife's uncle stood frozen, mouth hanging open, all that smug superiority draining from his face like water from a broken dam. 20 minutes ago, they'd been laughing at me. Called me an uneducated nobody who got lucky. Said a high school graduate had no business managing real money. Now they were watching their quarterly bonus evaporate in real time, and I hadn't even finished yet. My name is Jackson Hayes. I'm 36 years old, and I never went to college. Not because I couldn't, but because I had better things to do with my time and money. While my classmates were racking up student debt and nursing hangovers in dorm rooms, I was learning how money actually works. By the time they graduated, I had my first rental property paid off and was closing deals that would have made their economics professors weep. I met Caroline Whitmore at a charity auction 3 years ago. She was 29, beautiful in that effortless way some women have, with dark hair and blue eyes that made you forget whatever you were saying. She worked as an event coordinator for high-end fundraisers, the kind of woman who could make millionaires feel comfortable while convincing them to open their wallets. When she laughed at my terrible joke about overpriced wine, I knew I was done for. Our wedding was everything Caroline wanted. Small, intimate, at a vineyard in Napa Valley. Her parents were there, nice enough people who ran a successful catering business. Her younger brother Tyler came, fresh out of his MBA program and already talking about disrupting industries. But there was one side of her family I hadn't met yet, the Bradfords. Caroline's mother's brother, Preston Bradford, was the chief loan officer at Silverton National Bank, one of the largest regional banks in the state. His father, Gerald Bradford, had been the bank's president for 20 years before retiring, and his wife, Victoria, came from old money, the kind of family that had streets named after them. Caroline had mentioned them a few times, always with a mixture of pride and nervousness. They're very traditional, she'd said, very focused on education and credentials. Just be yourself. The dinner invitation came 2 months after the wedding. Caroline was anxious all week, changing outfits 3 times before we left, coaching me on conversation topics I should avoid. Don't mention that you didn't go to college unless they ask directly, she said, adjusting my tie for the 4th time. And if they do ask, just say you went into business right after high school. Make it sound intentional, not like you couldn't afford it. I pulled her hands away from my collar and looked her in the eye. Caroline, I'm not ashamed of my education. I make more money than most people with PhDs. If your family has a problem with that, it's their problem, not mine. She bit her lip, that little gesture she did when she was worried. I know, Jackson, I just want tonight to go well. They're important to me. The Bradford estate was exactly what you'd expect from people who measured their worth in pedigree rather than achievement. Wrought iron gates, circular driveway, a house that looked like it had been airlifted from an English countryside. A valet took my truck keys with barely concealed disdain, probably wondering why someone would drive a Ford F-150 to a place like this. Because it's paid for, I wanted to tell him, and because I use it to check on my properties, instead of pretending I'm above manual work. Preston Bradford answered the door himself, all silver hair and expensive cologne. He was maybe 55, with the kind of face that looked friendly until you noticed the calculation behind his eyes. Jackson, he said, extending his hand. Caroline's told us so much about you, though I have to admit the details were a bit sparse on your educational background. We hadn't even made it inside yet, and he was already probing. I shook his hand firmly. I graduated from Riverside High, then went straight into business. Seemed more practical than spending 4 years in classrooms. His smile tightened just slightly. Practical. Yes, I suppose that's one way to look at it. Inside, the house was a museum of wealth and status. Original paintings on the walls, furniture that probably cost more than my first car, and everywhere you looked, diplomas. Harvard, Yale, Stanford. The Bradfords didn't just have education, they displayed it like hunting trophies. Gerald Bradford was holding court in the sitting room, a scotch in one hand and a leather-bound book in the other. He was older than Preston, maybe 75, with the bearing of someone who'd never been told no in his entire life. His wife Victoria sat beside him, dripping in pearls and judgment. Ah, the newlyweds, Gerald said, standing to greet us. Caroline, my dear, you look lovely as always. And this must be Jackson. Preston tells me you're a businessman. Real estate investment, I said. I specialize in commercial properties and multifamily developments. Gerald's eyebrows rose slightly. Fascinating. And where did you study business? Wharton? Stanford? I studied in the real world, sir. Bought my first property at 19 and learned by doing. The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. Victoria set down her wine glass with a soft click that sounded like a judge's gavel. So you didn't attend university? Victoria said. It wasn't a question. No, ma'am. Didn't see the point in paying someone to teach me things I could learn faster and cheaper on my own. Preston laughed, but there was no warmth in it. That's certainly an interesting perspective, though I imagine you've encountered some limitations without proper credentials. Caroline squeezed my hand, a silent plea for me to let it go. But I'd spent 15 years building my business from nothing, and I wasn't about to apologize for it to people who'd inherited their positions. The only limitation I've encountered, I said calmly, is dealing with people who confuse credentials with competence. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Then Gerald laughed, a booming sound that filled the room. Well, he's got spirit, I'll give him that. Even if he lacks refinement. Dinner was an exercise in subtle humiliation. They seated me between Preston and Tyler, Caroline's MBA brother, while Caroline was placed across the table between her aunt and uncle. Every conversation seemed designed to highlight my educational deficiency. Tyler, Preston said, passing the wine, was just promoted to senior analyst at Morrison Consulting, youngest person in the firm's history to reach that position. All thanks to his Northwestern education, of course. Tyler beamed. The network alone was worth the tuition. Half my clients are fraternity brothers or professors who recommended me. That's wonderful, Caroline said, smiling at her brother. Jackson's built an impressive network too. All his properties are managed through relationships he's developed over the years. I'm sure they are, Victoria said, her tone suggesting she thought my network consisted of handymen and maintenance workers. But there's something to be said for institutional connections, the kind you can only get through proper education. Preston nodded sagely. Absolutely. At Silverton National, we prioritize relationships with alumni networks. Harvard, Yale, Stanford. When you're dealing with significant capital, you want to know the person across the table shares your values, your background. I took a sip of wine, letting them continue. They had no idea what they were revealing about themselves with every word. How large is your real estate portfolio, Jackson? Gerald asked. If you don't mind my asking. Currently sitting at about $40 million in assets, I said. Mix of commercial and residential properties across 3 states. Preston nearly choked on his duck confit. 40 million? Give or take, I said. Been a good few years. And you're financing these properties how? Gerald asked, his banker's instincts kicking in. Surely you're leveraged significantly. Some leverage? Sure, but I paid cash for most of them. Turns out, not having student loans freed up a lot of capital for investment. Victoria's fork clattered against her plate. You're saying you have 40 million in real estate with minimal debt? The properties are worth 40 million, I clarified. My equity is higher because I bought most of them below market value and added value through renovation. Preston was staring at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. That's impossible. Without institutional backing, without the right education and connections, nobody builds that kind of portfolio by 36. I did, I said simply. And I did it while your Harvard classmates were still figuring out how to read a balance sheet. Gerald set down his scotch, his expression hardening. Young man, I don't appreciate your tone. We've welcomed you into our home, and you're being deliberately antagonistic. With respect, sir, I've been nothing but honest. You're the ones who've spent the entire evening implying I'm less than because I chose work over college. I'm just pointing out that your assumptions might be wrong. They're not assumptions, Preston said coldly. They're observations based on decades in banking. People without proper education don't build legitimate wealth. They get lucky, make questionable decisions, and eventually lose everything when the market turns. Is that why you're still working at 55? I asked. Because your proper education gave you such financial security? Preston's face went red. I work because I'm passionate about banking, because I have a responsibility to uphold standards. And I work because I'm good at it, I said, and because I don't need credentials to prove my worth to people whose opinions don't matter. Jackson, Caroline said quietly, her voice tight with stress. Maybe we should go... No, Gerald said, standing up. He's right. This evening has gone poorly, and I think it's best if they leave. Before I left, though, Preston couldn't resist one last jab. You know, Jackson, if you ever need banking services that extend beyond basic checking accounts, Silverton National works with serious investors. Though I should warn you, we have fairly stringent requirements. Education and background checks are part of our due diligence. I smiled. Actually, I already bank with Silverton National, have for about 8 years now. His expression flickered with surprise. Really? Which branch? The downtown corporate branch, where they handle the larger accounts. How large? Gerald asked. The drive home was silent for the first 10 minutes. Caroline sat in the passenger seat, arms crossed, staring out the window. Finally, she spoke. That was a disaster. I kept my eyes on the road. They started it, Caroline. From the moment we walked in, they were looking down on me. So you had to make it worse? She turned to face me, tears in her eyes. They're my family, Jackson. I wanted them to like you. They don't want to like me. They want me to apologize for not being like them, and I'm not going to do that. She wiped her eyes angrily. You have no idea how embarrassing that was. Tyler was texting me under the table, asking what your problem was. My aunt looked like she wanted to call security. If you're embarrassed by me, I said carefully, then maybe you married the wrong person. That's not fair, isn't it? You spent the whole week coaching me on how to hide who I am. Don't mention this. Don't say that. Make sure they don't know you're just a high school graduate. Like I'm some shameful secret, because I knew this would happen. Caroline's voice cracked. I knew they'd judge you, and I wanted to protect you from it. I don't need protection from people like that. I need my wife to stand beside me, not apologize for me. We pulled into our driveway, and Caroline got out without another word. She went straight to the bedroom and closed the door. I stood in the kitchen, still wearing the tie she'd adjusted so carefully hours ago, and wondered if her family's opinion mattered more to her than I'd realized. The next morning, I made a decision. I was going to withdraw every cent from Silverton National and move it to a bank that judged clients by their accounts, not their diplomas. It was petty, maybe, but Preston Bradford needed to learn that credentials don't equal competence. I called the downtown branch and scheduled an appointment with the senior relationship manager. Then I called my accountant and lawyer to make sure everything was handled properly. What's this about? My accountant Sarah asked. Family issues, I said. Caroline's uncle works at the bank. Things got ugly at dinner last night. Sarah whistled. How ugly? Ugly enough that I'm closing the account. Jackson, that's a $7 million account. You're going to create a significant paperwork trail. Good, let them swim in it. The appointment was set for Friday at 2 p.m. I didn't tell Caroline. She'd been distant since the dinner, spending her evenings at her brother's apartment, probably getting an earful about my terrible behavior. Part of me wondered if this was going to cost me my marriage. But a bigger part of me knew that if Caroline couldn't stand up for me against her family's snobbery, we had deeper problems than a bad dinner party. Friday arrived with clear skies and a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in weeks. I dressed in my best suit, the one I wore for major property closings. If I was going to make a statement, I might as well look the part. The Silverton National downtown branch was a monument to institutional banking, marble floors, vaulted ceilings, and enough mahogany to deforest a small country. I walked past the regular tellers to the private banking section, where serious money got serious attention. Mr. Hayes, the receptionist said with a professional smile, Mr. Richardson is ready for you. Christopher Richardson was the senior relationship manager, a sharp man in his 40s who'd helped me set up my accounts years ago. He knew my business, knew my numbers, and never once asked about my education. Jackson, he said, shaking my hand warmly. Good to see you. Your assistant mentioned you wanted to discuss account restructuring. Actually, Chris, I'm here to close everything. His smile faltered. I'm sorry, close? Every account, business, personal, investment, all of it. Chris sat down heavily in his leather chair. Jackson, that's $7 million across multiple accounts. Can I ask why? Family reasons, I said. Caroline's uncle works here, Preston Bradford in commercial lending. Chris's expression changed immediately. Say no more. Preston's got a reputation for being difficult. He insulted me at a family dinner, implied I was stupid and reckless because I didn't go to college, said people without proper education don't build legitimate wealth. Chris sighed. Preston Bradford is everything wrong with old school banking. judges people by their pedigree instead of their performance. Half the loan officers here can't stand him. Well, I'm done giving him the satisfaction of having my money in his bank. This is going to hurt his numbers significantly, Chris warned. You're one of our largest individual accounts. Preston's division gets credit for overall deposits. Good. Chris pulled up my accounts on his computer, and I watched his eyes widen as he scrolled through the balances. You know what? I don't blame you. Preston's been coasting on his father's reputation for years. Maybe this will teach him some humility. While Chris prepared the withdrawal paperwork, Preston Bradford walked past the office. He glanced in, did a double take when he saw me, and backtracked. Jackson? What are you doing here? Banking business, I said coolly. Chris didn't look up from his computer. Mr. Hayes is restructuring his accounts. Preston's professional mask slipped into place. Well, if there's anything I can help with, we're always here to assist valued clients. Even if you don't have the traditional background most of our serious investors have. Actually, I said, standing up, I'm closing my accounts. All of them. Preston laughed. Very funny. But seriously, what brings you in? I'm completely serious. Every account with Silverton National is being closed today. His laugh died. You don't mean that. $7 million, Preston. Every cent. Being transferred to Riverside Community Bank by end of business. The color drained from his face. $7 million? You have $7 million with us? Chris printed out the account summary and handed it to Preston. Mr. Hayes has been a platinum client for 8 years. His combined accounts total $7.2 million, to be exact. Preston stared at the paper like it was written in code. This has to be a mistake. No mistake, I said. Just a high school graduate who got lucky, right? That's what you said. People like me make questionable decisions and lose everything when the market turns. Preston's jaw worked, but no sound came out. Behind him, I noticed a small crowd forming. Other bankers, drawn by the commotion. One of them was Gerald Bradford himself. What's going on here? Gerald demanded, his executive presence filling the doorway. Dad, Preston said weakly. This is Caroline's husband. He's trying to close his accounts. Trying? I raised an eyebrow. I'm doing it. Chris, how long until the transfers are complete? I can have it done in an hour, Chris said, clearly enjoying this. Though I should mention, Mr. Hayes, that Riverside Community's CEO is a friend of mine. I can call ahead and make sure they roll out the red carpet. Please do, I said. I prefer banking with institutions that judge clients by their accounts, not their diplomas. Gerald's face was turning an interesting shade of purple. Young man, do you understand what you're doing? Closing an account of this size creates significant disruption. Yes, sir. I do understand. I also understand that your son insulted my intelligence, questioned my business acumen, and implied that I'm not worthy of banking at your institution. So I'm taking my questionable $7 million elsewhere. Preston? Gerald said quietly, his voice deadly calm. Is this true? We just had dinner, Dad. Just conversation. You told him he didn't build legitimate wealth because he lacked proper education? Preston's silence was answer enough. Gerald turned to me, and for a moment, I saw something like respect in his eyes. Mr. Hayes, I apologize for my son's behavior. Preston sometimes forgets that wealth and wisdom come in many forms. I appreciate that, sir, but the damage is done. I have no interest in keeping my money somewhere my character is constantly questioned. Chris handed me the final paperwork. All set, Jackson. Transfers will be complete within 90 minutes. Riverside Community is expecting you. I shook his hand. Thanks, Chris. You've been great through all this. If Preston's other clients are smart, Chris said just loud enough for everyone to hear, they'll follow your lead. Banking should be about trust, not credentials. I walked out of that marble palace with my head high, leaving behind a room full of bankers scrambling to explain to their executives how they'd just lost a $7 million account. Behind me, I heard Gerald's voice rising in anger, Preston's stammered excuses, and the general chaos of consequences catching up with arrogance. Caroline called me 3 times before I made it to the car. I let it go to voicemail. Whatever she had to say could wait until I'd finished what I started. Riverside Community Bank treated me like royalty. Their CEO, Jennifer Torres, personally handled the account setup and offered terms that made Silverton National's rates look like highway robbery. By 5 p.m., every dollar was transferred, and I had a new banking relationship built on mutual respect. When I got home, Caroline was waiting in the living room. She'd been crying, mascara smudged around her eyes. "Uncle Preston called me," she said without preamble. "So did my grandfather. They're both furious." "I imagine they are. Jackson, you withdrew $7 million. $7 million. Do you know what that's going to do to Preston's quarterly numbers? His bonus?" I sat down across from her. "Caroline, do you know what he said to me? What they all said?" She wiped her eyes. "They said you were rude, that you insulted their hospitality. They spent an entire evening making me feel inferior because I chose work over college. Your uncle literally said I didn't build legitimate wealth, and you stood there and said nothing. Because I knew you'd do something like this," she shot back. "I knew you couldn't just let it go. Why should I? They disrespected me in my face, questioned my intelligence and my business, and now you're upset because I'm not letting them get away with it? They're my family. And I'm your husband." I stood up, done with this conversation. "When you decide which one matters more, let me know." I went to my office and closed the door. Outside, I heard Caroline crying, heard her call her mother, heard her pack a bag and leave. I should have felt guilty, should have felt something other than relief, but I didn't. The story hit the local business news within 2 days. Anonymous banking sources leaked that Silverton National had lost one of its largest individual accounts due to internal conflicts. The article didn't name me directly, but everyone in banking circles knew. My phone started ringing with other banks offering services, financial advisors wanting to discuss portfolio diversification, and journalists wanting the full story. Preston Bradford was quietly reassigned to a smaller branch 2 weeks later. Gerald Bradford retired early, citing health reasons, and Caroline moved back to her parents' house, where she could be surrounded by people who valued credentials over character. If you enjoyed this story about standing up for yourself, even when it costs you everything, please hit that like button and share this video. Leave a comment below about a time you had to choose between being right and keeping the peace. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about people who refuse to be diminished by other people's judgment. We're 3 months past the account withdrawal now, and I'm sitting in my office reviewing property reports when my phone rings. It's Jennifer Torres from Riverside Community. "Jackson," she says, "I've got an interesting opportunity for you. One of our commercial clients is selling a mixed-use property downtown. Prime location, good cash flow, but they need a buyer who can close quickly with minimal contingencies. What's the asking price? $4.5 million, but between you and me, they'll take 4 flat for a clean cash offer. I'm interested. Send me the details." After we hang up, I lean back in my chair and look out the window. Caroline's probably at her parents' house right now, having Sunday dinner with the Bradfords, explaining to everyone how I destroyed her family's reputation over nothing. Her Uncle Preston is probably there too, bitter about his reassignment, blaming me for consequences he brought on himself. But here's what they'll never understand. Respect isn't something you inherit through family connections or buy with Ivy League degrees. It's something you earn by treating people with dignity, regardless of their background. They failed that simple test, and I refuse to pretend otherwise just to keep peace with people who'd never see me as their equal. My phone buzzes with Caroline's lawyer's information. She wants to finalize the divorce quickly, split assets down the middle, move on. Part of me is sad about how it ended. Part of me knew it would end this way eventually. You can't build a life with someone whose family's approval matters more than your partnership. I text my lawyer to proceed with Caroline's terms. She can have the house, half the liquid assets, whatever she wants. I'll rebuild just like I did at 19, with nothing but determination and a refusal to let other people's limitations define my possibilities. The property Jennifer mentioned looks promising in the documents she sent. Good bones, solid tenants, and located right in the middle of the business district. I could close this month, start renovations by spring, and have it fully optimized by summer. Building wealth never stops just because your personal life falls apart. That evening, I get an unexpected call. It's Gerald Bradford. "Mr. Hayes," he says, his voice different from the imperious tone I remember, humbler somehow. "I owe you an apology." "I wasn't expecting that, sir." "I've spent 3 months thinking about what happened. Preston was wrong to speak to you the way he did. So was I. We judged you by credentials instead of character, and that was our failure, not yours. I appreciate you saying that." Gerald sighs heavily. "I built my career believing that education was the only path to success. Spent 40 years promoting people based on where they went to school rather than what they could do. You proved me wrong, and rather than accept that, I doubled down on my prejudice. I'm sorry." We talk for 20 more minutes. He tells me about his own father, a factory worker who never graduated high school but built a comfortable life through hard work and smart decisions. How Gerald spent his whole life trying to be different from his father, only to realize he lost something essential in the process. Caroline talks about you sometimes, Gerald says finally. She misses you. Regrets how things ended. She made her choice, I say. She chose your approval over our marriage. Maybe. Or maybe she was just scared. Scared that if she defended you, we'd reject her the way we rejected you. I think about that for a moment. Either way, the result was the same. You're right, Gerald says. I suppose I'm calling partly to apologize, and partly to see if there's any chance you'd consider reconciliation. Caroline's been miserable without you. What about you, I ask? Would you support that reconciliation? Or would it just be another Sunday dinner where everyone pretends to get along while secretly believing I'm beneath them? Gerald is quiet for a long time. I'd like to say I've changed completely, that I no longer care about credentials or pedigree. But old habits die hard, Mr. Hayes. What I can promise is that I'd never disrespect you again, and neither would Preston if he knows what's good for him. I think about Caroline, about the good times we had before her family's judgment infected our relationship, about whether love can survive in soil poisoned by conditional acceptance. I appreciate the call, sir, but I think Caroline and I are past the point of fixing things. She needs someone her family can be proud of without reservation, and I need someone who won't require her family's permission to stand beside me. I understand, Gerald says, and for what it's worth, you're twice the man I thought you were when we first met. After we hang up, I sit in the quiet of my office, thinking about paths not taken and bridges burned behind me. Sarah, my accountant, texts about the new property. The numbers look good, strong cash flow, minimal deferred maintenance. She recommends moving forward. I text back my approval. Let's close this month. Because that's what I do. I move forward, build things, create value where others see obstacles. It's what I've done since I was 19, with nothing but ambition and a refusal to let other people's expectations define my limits. 6 months later, I'm standing in the fully renovated mixed-use property, showing potential retail tenants the upgraded spaces. The building is beautiful now, all exposed brick and modern fixtures, honoring its history while embracing its future. Kind of like me, I suppose. My phone rings. Unknown number. I almost don't answer, but something makes me pick up. Jackson? It's Caroline, her voice tentative, uncertain. Hello, Caroline. I heard about the property downtown. It's beautiful. I walked by yesterday. Thank you. Silence stretches between us, filled with everything we didn't say during our marriage. Finally, she speaks. I was wrong. About everything. I should have stood up for you that night. Should have told them to stop. Should have been your wife instead of their niece. Yes, I say simply, you should have. Is there any chance? She stops, starts again. Is there any possibility we could try again? I've learned so much about myself these past months, about what I want, about who I want to be. I look out at the street below, watching people go about their lives, carrying their own stories of success and failure, love and loss. Caroline, I say gently, I don't think we can go back. Too much damage, too much distrust. You chose your family's opinion over our partnership, and I can't build a life wondering if you'll make that choice again next time. I understand. She's crying now. I just needed you to know that I'm sorry, that you were right and I was wrong, and I'll regret that choice for the rest of my life. After we hang up, I stand in my renovated building, surrounded by evidence of what's possible when you refuse to accept other people's limitations. The property is worth $6 million now. My portfolio has grown past $50 million. And I did it all without a college degree, without the right connections, without anything except determination and the willingness to prove people wrong through results rather than credentials. That's the thing about building wealth the hard way. You don't just build money. You build character, confidence, and the unshakable knowledge that your worth isn't determined by other people's approval. The Bradfords taught me that lesson, though not in the way they intended. Preston Bradford still works at Silverton National's suburban branch. Gerald Bradford plays golf and attends board meetings. Caroline runs her event planning business. And I keep building, keep growing, keep proving every single day that success doesn't require permission from people who confuse credentials with competence. My phone buzzes with a text from Jennifer Torres, another property opportunity, This one even bigger than the last. I respond immediately, send details. Because that's who I am. The high school graduate who refused to apologize for choosing work over school, action over theory, results over credentials. The man who walked away from $7 million in banking relationships rather than accept disrespect. The husband who chose self-respect over marriage when his wife couldn't do the same. And if there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that the most expensive thing you can lose isn't money. It's not properties or portfolios or business relationships. It's your dignity, your sense of self-worth, your willingness to stand up and say no when people try to make you feel less than you are. I refuse to lose that, even when it cost me my marriage, even when it created chaos in Caroline's family, even when everyone said I should have just kept quiet and played along. Some things are worth more than peace. Some battles are worth fighting even when you lose everything else. And some people need to learn that judgment has consequences. The Bradfords learned that lesson the expensive way, $7 million expensive. And I'd do it again without hesitation.